Hi, this is Ken Rohla with FreshAndAlive.com. I'm here today interviewing a good friend of mine, Harold Sexson of Nature's Oils in Arizona. And Harold and I met at a conference a little over a year ago and wound up doing an event together, and I've just always been impressed with what Harold does and what Harold knows and the experiences he's had over a lifetime. A lot of really interesting stuff, but also a lot of great knowledge in this man's head, and I wanted to get it out and share a little bit of it with the public. And so I've got Harold on the line today. Harold, are you there?
I certainly am, thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's do a few shameless plugs. Harold's website is naturesoils.net, and you can find Harold's contact information there. And Harold, tell us a little bit about your business, Nature's Oils. I know we're going to talk about a lot of different things today. I know you do energy medicine. I know you do essential oils. I know you do geopathic stress elimination and that kind of stuff. So tell us what all you do.
Well, I have to admit it's kind of a long list. Not to beat on my chest, but just that's the way life has done it, I guess. Anyway, yeah, the essential oils, I have probably more different types of, I have all the standard oils, but I also have some very unusual oils that you don't find everywhere. And when I get oils in, I do an energetic process where I increase their field strength. So if somebody was dousing, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit, but if somebody was dousing for what's the energy field of the oil, usually with most oils you get in, usually they have around a 3 to 4 foot diameter field is pretty typical. When I get through, they have around a 50-foot field around them. So,
wow.
And the only thing that's really doing is the natural, how would I say, parts or essence of the oil has become more prevalent, so it isn't covered up with something else that either man has added to it or some emotion has added to it. So you typically use less oil than you would ordinarily for the same purpose. So that's the reason I did it. Yeah, I started out doing it one time. I just kind of had this idea, so what I did is I took an oil and I did the energy stuff, and I went ahead and put it away, and I let it sit for a year because I thought I want to see if this is just something that goes on for a day or a week or whatever. And in the year, it was exactly the same as it was when I did it to begin with. So,
wow, so it holds it.
So then I decided I would say something about it, but I didn't want to say anything about it until I knew
mm-hmm.
That it stayed stable and didn't go away, in some length of time or whatever. So,
mm-hmm.
And I also import like Hindu ceremonial oils, particularly good for grounding or meditation, that are very unusual. One of them is midi, which is basically sandalwood oil going through clay pots. It kind of smells like wet dirt, but it's very, very grounding because, and when you look at the chakras, lots of times people are not grounded very well, and this helps bring grounding capability.
How do you spell that? Is that M-I-T-I oil?
It's M-I-T-T-I.
Okay, because people are going to be looking this up.
True. Yeah, I believe it's on the website, and my phone number and stuff is on the website. And the website, you cannot order from the website. I do not have a shopping cart on it, but you can call me with whatever things you want to do or whatever size you want. If you use a lot of, like lavender is a good example, then you can buy any size bottle you want from me. So, you can go from there, and lots of people say, well, I use tons of lavender, and why don't I get a 1 ounce bottle, or why don't I get a 100 milliliter bottle, which is 3 1/3 ounces, and they're good for 6 months or whatever they do with it. So,
Now, Harold, I know you've been doing this a long time. About how many years have you been zapping oils this way with what I would call scalar energy? Some other people might call it torsion energy or tachyon energy or whatever. But how long have you been doing this?
that part, I mean, I've been in business for about 15 years doing this, but as far as doing that, I did it about 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay, so you've been doing it a while. This is very interesting, and this speaks to how far ahead Harold is in the game, because what I'm seeing is there's this new trend for people to use these energy devices, these scalar energy devices, to, let's say, program or zap different supplements or materials with scalar energy devices to alter their, let's say, their subatomic structure, their energetic structure. And then these substances become much more powerful. And I'm seeing a trend in this now. For example, there are these supplements I call Ormus homeopathics, where people are, putting Ormus elements, these monoatomic elements, into water and then programming it homeopathically with these energy devices. So what you're doing is, first of all, far ahead of your time, but it also is becoming the trend with the cutting-edge folks now, because it makes these things much more powerful, and you can put frequencies in that have additional benefits, correct?
Yeah, I try not to add additional frequencies with the things that I do, because what I'm trying to do is enhance the ability that the oil already has. Since oils, if you look at a gas chromatograph, usually have around 200 components in them. Mm-hmm. And so what I would like to do is just bring out all of those components so they can do what they do for the plant, which is protect it from any kind of, mold or fungus or any problems that the plant would have. Since those energetics are basic in our cell structure itself, by having those oils or using those, you reinforce your system, because it's something that's already there that gets pulled in. That's not a vitamin or a mineral or amino acid, but it's intrinsic in the cells. So that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, I don't use any, I don't use any normal devices like a skio or any other thing. I don't use that on the oils at all. So, there's several different approaches people take, but I try to keep it neutral. I also use a lot of crystals, so I have them all around where the oils are stored as well to keep things pretty neutral. I also have one of Ken's devices on the house.
Oh, yeah.
So to me, all of that just helps, because you'd like to keep things as neutral as possible. So
right. Now, and I know, too, a lot of people, when they hear about essential oils, they think aromatherapy, and they don't get the real power of essential oils and what amazing things they can do. And so let's talk a little bit about that, the various things that you can do with essential oils and the kinds of results that you've seen with them. And so talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the basic things about essential oils, as long as it's a distilled oil, is basically every drop of oil is almost a pound of herbs. And that's not true of every oil, but it's true enough to see that as how representative that is of how powerful they are. So when you're using oils, you only need to use, a couple drops at one time. And if you typically, well, it depends on where you're using it, but if you put them in your hand and you rub your hands together, all the energy points in the system is in your hands, your ears, and the bottom of your feet, and to some extent the face. But most oils you don't want to put on your face, because it's too sensitive to skin. In fact, some people that do oils say you should never put oils directly on the skin. Yeah, but the hands and the feet, they'll hold up to most oils. As far as absorption, they absorb into the skin in about 20 seconds, and when they do, they are not. You can't discern them. If you did a blood sample, you could find some of the components in the oil, but you couldn't find the oil itself. And also by breathing it in when you do that, after you put them on your hands, when you breathe it in, it affects the limbic system right at the very, very base of the brain, so that it's, more effective in that respect because it goes directly to the blood-brain barrier. It goes directly through it like the nose does. So some of the things that people use these for is almost anything you can think of. This last weekend, was a number of doctors I was with who are ophthalmologists that use this in their eye care, which I had not really heard of that being a large portion of any type of oil business I had run before, but they just use a couple drops. They put it in water, and they put it on a towel, and then the person puts the towel over their face, over their eyes. And so it's very, very diluted by the time it gets, you're just basically getting some vapors, to the eyes as far as that's concerned. But
now, does that help with vision or pain or what?
This is trying to have in this particular case, it's trying to make the eye make corrections for things like cataracts, glaucoma, several different other things that they had only just basically mentioned, but they had used it on a regular basis, which was kind of unusual. There's tons of books that talk about the therapeutic use of essential oils. One of the kind of practical things we do, I have an oil I call 6L, which is 6 oils that begin with the letter L, so it smells rather like lavender and lemon and lime are three of the more common things in it. But what we do is have a little sprayer that's 2 ounces, fill it up with water, put about 10 drops of the oil in it, shake it up, and then you can use it to either disinfect the room, or you can spray it on your hands. Like if you go to the grocery store or you're out in public, you don't want to use Perel or any of the the commercial products that have other things in them. So you can disinfect your hands very easily. My wife uses it all the time.
Brilliant.
And, 1 bottle of oil in that use will last you for months and months and months. Because you're only putting 10 drops every time you do it. You're going to make probably 50 bottles of that solution.
And don't the oils also, they just kill pathogens. They don't kill beneficial bacteria, correct?
Yeah, that's one nice thing about oils. They're fairly selective, where most things that kill things off generally are not selective. They kill everything off, whereas oils are, unless you're doing something really, really strong. Like, for instance, if you were doing oregano, which is, everybody knows, kills almost everything, oregano would probably kill both off. Also, oregano, you need to be a little careful because it's so hot of an oil that it'll actually burn the skin.
Wow.
And if somebody swallows it, I've heard people, using fairly large quantities of swallowing them, getting rid of all sorts of stomach and digestive issues, it will actually burn a hole in the stomach lining, and people have died from doing that. So when somebody wants to take them internally, like oregano, if you're going to do it, if you have a capsule, fill it up with, coconut oil and maybe put in 1 drop of oregano. And just because you don't know how much mucus is in your stomach. Some cases it may be okay, and some cases it may be low. You don't know what that is, so it's better to play on the safe side.
Yeah, I always tell people to start with small doses and work your way up.
Yep, very true.
So you put it in some kind of a carrier oil?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Now, and that's, one of the advantages I see with essential oils, also with detoxification, you can talk about this. One of the huge advantages I find with essential oils when detoxing the body is that, particularly if you're sick or you're weak, if you're chemical sensitive or something like that, or EMF sensitive, and you can't handle ingesting herbs or supplements, then essential oils you can use topically to detox the body and still, get progress and results when you can't necessarily ingest stronger things in the GI tract. Is that correct?
Yes, and probably the only exception to that is if you had a allergy to one of the components in the oil, which is rare, but never say never. I mean, even if it's organic and everything else, because like I say, there's 200 components in there, and your body may just have a sensitivity to one of those particular components. And, like I say, rare, but it does happen. So one of the ways to check if you're using oil is to take a regular Band-Aid and put a drop of oil on it and put the Band-Aid on your wrist and see if you start getting any skin sensitivity from it. I wouldn't advise this for hotter oils, but I'm talking about, normal oils that are, middle of the road, lavender and things. And see if you get a sensitivity overnight, for a day. Generally, it's rare, but once in a while there's somebody who does have particularly people that are chemically sensitive, sometimes their immune system and their autoimmune has got so far out that it goes after just about anything you can think of. I have a couple of clients that are just, I always kind of make a joke, they're sensitive to air. It's that, even things that have been painted some time ago, there may be some components in it that are even in the, maybe in 1 parts per billion, it's enough to activate it for them.
So you can use, you can also use quantum biofeedback devices like the QXCI Skio or the Indigo to figure out if you got sensitivities to essential oils, correct?
Yeah, and with those devices, you can also see what oils would be particularly good for you, for you to use, because it does a kind of a layout of, it's not every oil in the world, but it is probably, I think they have probably 40 to 50 oils that they evaluate in there. So, yes.
Okay. And I know, like I say, I'm a big fan of using them for detoxification. But even if you're not sensitive, let's say, the average person who maybe just wants to do a cleanse and they're not dying or of anything or super sick or anything, what kinds of essential oils can they use for detoxing?
Juniper is one of the oils you can use because it helps detox. Juniper, you have to be careful on how much you use, because you don't want to go too far the other way where you're causing the person to have a reaction because of the detox. You want it to go smooth, do it longer, but at a lower level, But that's one that's pretty common. Sometimes you can actually put oil on the outside, like if you're trying to detox the liver, you could put a couple drops on your hands and actually rub the liver, directly on the skin, particularly before you're going to bed or whatever, to, help let it work at night, since there's a 24-hour cycle to the body, and to do it particularly at night is good, because it seems to be there's nothing else to interrupt the body in the middle of the time.
And you can also use essential oils for dental purposes too, right? It's like very detoxifying. Well, not detoxifying. It's very antiseptic in the mouth. Certain oils are, right?
Yes, I've made a blend called Fresh Mouth, which has basically based on cultures, Petri dish samples. There's about, I think, 9 oils in it that I put in it. It kills almost all bacteria in the mouth. And if somebody has gingivitis, if they continuously put 1 drop on their toothbrush when they're, brushing their teeth, it will eventually get rid of that gingivitis. And also, keep tar and build up, less than normal, because there's not going to be anything for it to stick to as much. I've had some really, really dramatic cases where people have used Fresh Mouth and got phenomenal, particularly people that are smokers, who have a much more, they're much more likely to have problems with gingivitis, because the smoke irritates the junction between the teeth and the gum, and between the nicotine and other things that are in cigarettes. so that they tend to build things up much faster. And I make a stronger version of fresh mouth for those people that really have a lot of stuff going on called Mike's Blend, because a gentleman named Mike suggested it to me, and I said, good, I'll just put your name on it. So, and it has everything that fresh mouth has in it, but it also has an additional oregano, and it has additionally frankincense. So it's a little more difficult to take. The fresh mouth is kind of cinnamon clove tasting, whereas the Mike's Blend has a little. You can taste the oregano is not as strong as regular oregano would be, but you can tell there's oregano in it. It's definitely more burning than the other one is.
Yeah, that makes sense what you're saying particularly about the tartar buildup slowing down, because what makes tartar and calcification in the body are these nanobacteria that create these films that wind up, building up and becoming calcification. So if you're knocking those nanobacteria back with essential oils, that makes sense. You would get the slower accumulation of tartar. And also I found too, when people are sick, if they've got a cold or a flu or something like that, one of the things that kind of perpetuates the cold or the flu is when you get up in the morning and, you've got a mouth full of bacteria from sleeping with your mouth closed during the night, and then what do? You get up typically and eat or drink something and wash those bad bacteria down into the gut and kind of perpetuate the the illness. So if you get up first thing in the morning and brush your teeth and rinse or brush with these essential oils, it's going to kill that back too as well.
Yeah, what's also neat on the fresh mouth, since inside the mouth is all mucous membranes, when you do use that, even though it's one drop, it penetrates through the skin and actually, does more than just skin level. Mm-hmm. It's actually helping your overall system, when you do that. So that, very true.
Interesting. And, of course, fresh breath. I mean, when I travel, particularly when I'm doing public speaking, I've always got a little bottle of essential oil that's a breath freshener. And so, and it's funny, I was thinking, too, when you were talking about previously about using these oils in the bath, I got, when I first learned about essential oils years ago, I got real gung-ho and decided to use it in my bath. So I just dumped a whole bunch of, I think it was orange oil because it smelled so good. I mean, not a few drops, a whole bunch. Took a bath and immediately jumped out burning all over. So you definitely have to use these things with measure. It's like a lot of times people think, well, if, a little bit's a good thing, more is better. And that's definitely not the case with essential oils.
Definitely not true. Definitely not. I probably mentioned to you there was a gentleman who had, again, an autoimmune problem, and so he would take a hot tub and he would put in black pepper oil, which is pretty warm in itself, and he would put in 40 or 50 drops, into the hot tub, and I told him, I says, I wouldn't put in that much if I was you. And he said, why? I says, I feel so good afterwards. And I said, well, just like, if you were taking a prescription drug, if you're putting a ton of those in there, you're going to load up your liver very strongly. I mean, hopefully it'll get through it, but you're really loading up the liver, beyond its normal capabilities when you put in that quantity. I mean, if you just think of the mental picture, imagine putting 50 pounds of black pepper in the hot tub. And hopping into it. I mean, you wouldn't do that, and that's in essence what he was doing. I know he didn't like my response, and I suggested he use something else, maybe a couple drops of peppermint, and with maybe a couple drops of black pepper, and something that would be, still be refreshing, but you're not loading yourself up with tons and tons of anything is in moderation, nothing in excess, and that's excess.
Right. So these oils, they penetrate into the body, and then they release toxins and waste from the cells, correct? And then that flushes through the
because what they're doing is balancing those cells so those cells can let go of the things that they are latched on to them. So it's And as far as the components that are in oils, oh my gosh, there's probably better than 1,000 different components that are in these oils. I mean, some of the books I have, there's a whole section on just all the different types of components that are in oils. And every single plant, even if it's a different species or a hybrid of it, will have a slightly different, concoction in its makeup. I mean, a good example is there's a lavender that's not lavender like we're normally used to that grows in India, and I call it Indian lavender. It also has another name. And it smells like lavender, except that it has more limonene, which is, the thing that's in lemon. So it tends to be more lemon-smelling. So a lot of people that don't particularly care for lavender, they can tolerate Indian lavender, and it works just about the same as regular lavender does. In other words, it can get you to relax, sleep better, kind of turn off the randomness enough and calm things down without having any side effects.
That brings up a good point. Are you aware of or do any work with different body types? Or you have to take in certain considerations with different body types. Like, for example, in Ayurveda, you've got the Kapha, Pitta, and Vata body types.
Right, the doshas, yep.
Yeah, do you take that into account when you're working with somebody with oils?
I usually...
Or do you find certain oils unbalance people and they don't unbalance others?
Well, that's a true statement. There's some people that, because I have people come to me fairly often that can't sleep. And of course, not sleeping has a multi-level, many causes. It could be hormones. It could be the inability to relax. It could be there's a lot of stress going on that isn't resolved in the day. Could be their adrenals are shot. I mean, there's just a lot of different potential things that it could be. So I usually have an order of things, and I tell people initially, why don't you try lavender? Put a couple drops on your pillowcase, maybe a drop on your hand and rub it together and smell it before you go to bed. And if that doesn't work, then maybe you ought to go to something like English, sometimes called Roman chamomile, which is stronger, and try a drop or two of that and see if you can sleep well. And if that doesn't work, then, you could use marjoram as well because it's also a relaxer like lavender is. But the other one that's stronger is valerian, which is natural valerian, which is usually an extract. I mean, you can get it as an oil, but sometimes it's, could be one or the other. And use valerian. Usually valerian works, but the only thing I don't like about valerian is that, it may relax things, but also at the end of the cycle when you wake up, sometimes with valerian, depending on the person, you have, you're groggy. You don't pop up like you normally would and be fully awake. So, but I have some people that, I have a couple people I know that use all three of them at the same time, and I don't really recommend that. But it seems to work for them, and they've done it. One lady that was taking care of her elderly mother, and she was trying to work a full-time job and had a lot of stress going on and trying to hold everything together, and she used the three of those, and it worked very well for her for quite some period of time. So, but you go into these things one step at a time, because to me that the least you can do if it works, the better.
Right.
Rather than loading yourself all up. There are many blends that, relaxing blends that nearly every company that's in the business makes some form of, or sometimes several, relaxing type blends where you can mix different combinations of those or others. I mean, those are not the only thing, but those are just the most, common ones that you would find.
Mm-hmm. And you make your own blends as well, right? You just mentioned a couple.
I do.
And so tell us about some of the blends that you make and what they're used for.
Okay, well, I mentioned Freshmouth and I mentioned 6L. Those are two. But another one that I did at the conference that you and I met when we were in the Angeles area was, I call it Dr. G's Digestive Blend. And this was Dr. Gabor. He was up in front of the audience. He says, and here's what I've used for years to help my digestion out. And he gave a list of oils. And I said, do you mind if I make a blend out of those? And he said, no, go ahead. So I have made that. It's sold pretty well. I've had people take it that have had constipation for years sometimes, and it's went away. But what you do with it, how you use it, again, is very little. About a half an hour before you eat, you put 1 drop, maybe 2 drops, but I suggest 1 drop to start out, in about 3 to 4 ounces of water, and drink that. And then and that's all you do.
Cool.
Not much to it, but it works amazingly well because, again, by even putting in 1 drop, you're doing, a pound of herbs. So I've had many people repeat that, and purchase it 3 or 4 times because they liked how well it worked. Another one I make, I'll mention 2 others. I could go on, but anyway, one is headache relief.
Oh, that has got to be a good seller because I know a lot of people that have headaches.
So what I did is I took all the oils that I found. I have well over 100 books on essential oils. And so what I did is I took a combination of different oils that had used for headaches, because I've looked at even places like Trader Joe's, and they have a headache blend, and it's, lavender and peppermint. It's pretty simple, so I've made up one that has several oils in it, including feverfew, which is a known, headache reducer in itself. And because you put it between your 2 eyes, the temples, and the back of the head on the occipital back there in the back of the small of your neck, it's pretty strong. So that's the one and only oil I mix with a carrier oil. So it's mostly jojoba oil. And you just get a little bit on your finger. Probably not even a drop. And you do those 4 points. If the headache is coming on, in other words, you just feel it start, it will get rid of headaches almost every time. If the headache is full-blown and it's going strong, not necessarily would it work, because then you got all the blood vessels constricted and everything else, so it's having to do a lot more work in order to be effective. And the other one is my favorite that I came up with. It's called Lopar. And this is a combination of 45 different oils plus gold. This is gold like you would think of gold that was in your teeth, gold. In other words, it's not a liquid.
Is the gold dissolved?
It is what Lopar, the reason it's a funny-sounding word, because it's a combination of love, peace, harmony, and resolution. So what I did is I went through my entire total of all the oils I have that would fit those 4-word descriptions, and I combined them to make Lopar.
Now, is the gold dissolved in the oil, or is it like little flakes of gold? What is it?
It has little flakes, but I find it's like a catalyst. In other words, there's very, very little of it in there. It's really, really small flakes. But by having it present in there has seemed to what makes if you want to call it, magic work. And if you put Lopar on, it changes smell based on your skin, chemistry. So in about a half an hour, it will smell different on different people.
Interesting. Well, it makes sense. Gold also has a certain frequency that is very healing as well. So just energetically, I would think it adds to it.
So you're adding that into the oils themselves. So
interesting.
And there's others, like I have Pain Exit, but that's, again, almost every company that makes oils makes some sort of a pain, reducing thing. And another one that I use called Focus and Cleansing, which originally I had made it up because it affects every organ in the body to help people lose weight. And after I did that, I decided I really didn't want to get into the weight loss business at all. So when I was still in industry, I had already made this up, and I had people who were feeling nauseated, and they come over to me, Harold, I want to go home. I don't feel good. And I says, well, great, here. Take a couple drops of this, put it on your hands, rub your hands together, smell it, and I'll be back in the shop in, 10 minutes or so. And if you still want to go home, you can go home. I never had anybody go home.
Wow. Gimme.
It's hitting everywhere, so.
Wow, that's cool. That's way cool. Well, let me ask you this. I've got my detox protocols that I do, and I always start with a colon cleanse, and then I move on to a kidney bladder cleanse. Yeah, because you want to get the eliminative systems of the body working before you start pulling toxins and waste and acid out of tissue. So I always work on the colon first, then I go to the kidneys and bladder, then I do liver gallbladder cleanse, and then I move on to parasite cleansing, and then I work on the endocrine glands. So with that kind of a sequence, what kinds of oils, first of all, could I use, or what kinds of blends, whatever you have, that I could use starting out, first of all, with a colon cleanse or intestinal cleanse? What would add to that?
Colon-wise, nothing particularly comes to mind. I could look up in all the stuff.
I know that like peppermint oil helps with digestion and things like that.
Yeah, in fact, I mention peppermint lots of times, put it on your hands and actually rub it on your stomach. Mm-hmm. Just as long as you're not going to bed real soon.
Oh, really?
Because once in a while you get, somebody that relaxes them, which is, odd. That's the opposite, that sometimes happens. But for most people, peppermint, if you rub it on your stomach, is an energizer, and you'll be able to go faster and longer.
Interesting. So that would be good to take before work, rub on your stomach before work.
Yes.
Peppermint oil. Cool. Yep. Okay. All right. And then in those that sequence of cleanses, kidney, bladder, liver, gallbladder, parasites, and then working on the glands, what kinds of oils can support those?
Because I mentioned juniper, that's going to be working on mostly the liver, somewhat on the kidneys. An excess of juniper would be affecting the kidneys, if it was too much. But lemon, grapefruit, those kinds of things. Lemon is very good, and it's not too costly either to have. Peppermint overall is good. I was just trying to think of some other.
I know you mentioned oregano oil for parasites.
Yes, it would work well for that if you get to that point. The other one that's a little more uncommon would be parsley. Because it helps on overall toxins and urinary tract, kind of that overall thing there. Just trying to think through. Well, it depends also on their how well their circulation was. If somebody had fairly, compromised circulation, you might want to have black spruce. It would help kind of overall with, that kind of stuff.
Interesting. Okay. Well, anything else you want to talk about relating to essential oils before we move on to my next subject, which I'm jazzed about? But is there anything we've left out that you might want to mention about essential oils before we move on?
No, I can't think of other than if you were using them for a non-physical thing like for meditation.
Oh, yeah.
Things like I mentioned the MIDI, when we very first started for grounding. There's another oil called Buddha wood, which is a type of sandalwood, even though it doesn't smell particularly like sandalwood. And then some people like rose, only because I think they like the smell more than anything else. But the feeling, if you're the frankincense, there's a couple different kinds of frankincense. The one that's used for mental functions and things like that is it's called Serrata. Would be the second name of it.
How do you spell that?
Yes. Pardon?
How do you spell Serrata?
Serrata is Serrata.
Okay.
And they've done a lot of research on different types of, frankincense, Serrata, how much it'll help people that, have Alzheimer's and people have ADHD. And in other words, any type of a brain function or meditation, it enhances that. And it's not very expensive either. So that's another part of my oils. I try to keep the cost as low as I can so that anybody can afford to buy them. So instead of doing a stab. But that's another thing. And some people like some of the more biblical oils to use for meditation, or they can use those too. Spikenard's another one. Myrrh. Those, of course, they're kind of an acquired smell because they're not really very. How do you say? They're not particularly like a flower. Then one of my more popular oils is lotus oil, which affects the 4th through the 7th chakra, and it's very, very, very strong. Somebody was using it. I mean, you could use it as a perfume, but you'd only want to put maybe a drop on, and you would smell it all day long.
Wow,
that's strong. People have said, well, that doesn't smell exactly like, lotus I've smelled before. And my answer is that's because it's not pure lotus. It's in a sandalwood base, and it's what's called an attar, which is a combination of sometimes other plants other than lotus. It has lotus in it, but it's not pure lotus oil. But the effectiveness of it is phenomenal. I mean, I've had it for probably well over 10 years, and I just sell people buy it and over and over and over and over again. So it's something that wear out and they go away and do something else because it's quite a bit cheaper than rose or something like that, but they get similar effects from it.
Now, is lotus is that historically, did that come from Asia and China, that area of the world?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, India is where I get it from.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I didn't think about India. My wife is Chinese, and so that's why I think about that, because I see lotus being used a lot in food and medicine in Asia when I'm over there. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. And I always love myrrh. I just love saying myrrh. Myrrh. It's like it's a good John Houseman word. You remember John Houseman in the movie The Paper Chase?
Yeah.
Mr. Bird, Mr. Murr. I love saying Murr. It's a good John Houseman word. So anyway, well, let's talk about another thing that you do, which I'm really jazzed about and I love, is geopathic stress zones and how to clear them. First of all, how to find them and how to clear them. I'll let you explain it, but I want to put my 2 cents in on it. Because the way I think of geopathic stress zones, they can be man-made, with structures that we build, but they're also, we've got this energy coming up from the center of the Earth that people like Nassim Haramein and others say we've got a singularity at the center of the Earth that's emitting this radiation, which I call scalar waves. Other scientists call it scalar waves. Some people call it torsion waves or tachyon energy or zero point or whatever, but basically this faster than light solid energy that's coming up from the center of the Earth, and it has an effect on living organisms. And when it passes through the surface of the Earth and the minerals in the Earth, those minerals act as oscillators that change the frequency of it. And you could be living in an area where you might be over some minerals, so let's say, for example, radioactive elements, that may have a frequency that's not harmonious to living organisms, and therefore you need to do
harmonic of those, yeah.
Right. And so you've got to do something to change that energetic, otherwise you can have some really nasty side effects, which you'll talk about. So that's kind of my take on that. So tell us, first of all, how can you find and locate if you've got geopathic stress zones where you live or wherever you're at, and then what can you do about it?
Well, I use dowsing. And if somebody, wants to know if their house has any geopathic zones, the first question I ask, are you healthy? because I have found generally that people that are unhealthy, particularly cancer, almost always have a geopathic zone going through their bed.
Wow.
And I had a friend that used to be in our other neighborhood where we used to live, and his wife had died from breast cancer, and he remarried a year later or so with a much younger lady, and within like 6 months or so, she went to the doctor, and he said, well, you have breast cancer. And I said, hey, you don't have to believe anything I'm doing. I'm not trying to make a believer out of you, but let me check your house out. And so sure enough, there was a zone that went right through the center of where she slept in the bed. And we neutralized that, and I'll mention how to do that in a minute. And she also got, the little where they put a tattoo of a little place where they do radiation, which is one of the more milder forms of chemos. And they put radiation in this spot, and she did that. I also made up some oils for her so it wouldn't burn her skin, and she completely, it completely went away. She never had any more problem with it at all.
Wow. Yeah, and I've heard of instances on more than one occasion of people sleeping or being in proximity to a geopathic stress zone, and that building historically had a high rate of cancer or disease. And
yes.
Have you seen that?
Yes. I've had other examples where I had somebody who had it, and the same thing. I told them, I said, you don't have to believe this. And they thought, oh, it's a bunch of hooey, But yeah, you can if you want to do it, you can. And it was there. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Also, these are also affected by earthquakes.
Interesting. Do earthquakes permanently set them, or they just happen while the earthquake is going on? How does that work?
They change them. Like, say you had one, and somebody like me came and blocked it, from coming to your house, and then there was a big earthquake that happened. It could stay there, or it could have completely gone away, or it could have moved to another place in your house. I mean, it's just kind of a wild card as far as earthquakes. We used to live in Southern California, and when I first learned how to do this, my daughter complained that she was having headaches suddenly, and she had really never had headaches before. So I thought, well, good test here. Let's see if I can find any of these geopathic zones, and if so, let's see what happens. So sure enough, I found one that just went through the very top of where her head was in the bed. It didn't go up and down the bed. It just went across. And then I traced it back to the street, and we had something that's called a dusty miller. It's a plant that grows pretty much in Southern California, but it has kind of a gray appearance. And it was growing like a ribbon cable that came out of a computer, which is not normal. So it affects plants, trees, and it'll cause them usually to aberrate in some unusual way. In some cases, it'll kill it. It just depending on how strong it is. I had a gentleman in his house. He had a plant by the front door. He had a big tall ceiling, so he had like a tree by the front door, and he had replaced it 3 or 4 times. So I came in and I said, yep, the sucker goes right through where this tree is.
Wow. So
I neutralized it, and I asked him about a year later because he put in another tree. I said, well, did that tree live? And he said, yes. It didn't die. And I said, good. Okay. And then occasionally you'll find situations which are fairly rare where you'll have them crisscrossing through a house where there's more than one.
Wow.
I had a house up in Sedona that a lady was saying, every time I walk by this corner of the house here, I'd kind of get the shivers. And it didn't go through any beds or anything or the front door of this house, but it was about in the center of the house, and there were 2 of them from 2 different directions, and that's exactly where it crisscrossed, is right in that place. So we got rid of those. So you just never know, what it'll be. Like I say, most of the time it's only 1, but sometimes you get, I think the most I ever had in one house is 5.
Wow.
That's, again, very, very rare.
Well, listening to this, I'm thinking I need to take you up to the Devil's Tramping Ground in North Carolina. I've never heard of this place, but it's like this place in the mountains of North Carolina where there's this ring out in the woods, and nothing will grow there. And there's all kinds of folklore and stories about, you know, people camping out there and having all kinds of bizarre supernatural experiences, negative experiences. And I always wondered if there's like some geopathic stress there that's creating that. It's like nothing will grow, and scientists have analyzed the soil and everything. There's nothing in the soil that would do it. It's like something energetic. So it'd be cool. Probably be the end of the tourism, though, if you went up there and cleared it.
Oh, and it's not an Indian burial ground or anything like that either.
Yeah, I don't think it is, but, you know, you never know. I just thought that'd be funny. You kill the whole tourism industry with eliminating geopathic stress. So, not to interrupt you, but so tell us how, first of all, how do we find and identify these zones?
Well, what I usually do is douse.
Right. Well, I already asked you that. So dowsing, are there like devices or other ways? Because I know some people, you know, probably wouldn't feel that they're good at dowsing or something like that. Are there other ways besides dowsing?
Yeah, you could use what's called the boinger. You know, that kind of boings up and down and find out what your yes is and what your no is. You could use a pendulum if you wanted to, again, figuring out what your yes and what your no is.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I use L rods, you know, which you hold in both hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I have them, you know, if it's positive and a yes, it goes out, and if it's a negative, it goes in. But my wife, I mean, she does the same thing, and hers are exactly the opposite. They go in for yes and out for no. So, but you need to find out what your yes and what your no is, and it's how you ask the question also that's somewhat critical. I ask if there are any noxious zones, anything that would be detrimental to these people's health. If, you know, is there any of those exist in this property? Because if it's an acre lot, I'd like to know if it's somewhere else on the lot other than just the house. If they're an apartment, then I say in this apartment. And I ask that question rather, you might say, vaguely, because there's several different definitions for what things are. You know, some people call interrupted ley lines, underground water that could be going underneath the house that would affect people. So what I want to do is make a grouping that includes everything, even if we haven't even defined it yet, that would be detrimental to the people living in this house.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get a yes, then there's a couple of things I've, one of the things I do is I have people send me, if I'm doing it, you can do it on a map. So if somebody draws on a piece of paper, you know, the layout of their house, where the bedrooms are, and which way is north. By map dowsing, I have people sometimes that send me those, and then what I do is I have them call me first, and first let me see if you even have any. And if you do, then do the map and send it to me, and what I'll do is I'll send it back to you with where they are, and how to neutralize it. I neutralize them. There's several ways of really, how would I say, blocking them is probably a better word. But one of the ways is by using an omega sign that's made out of, I use coat hangers, but you can use them out of, it doesn't matter what it's made out of particularly. You could use welding rod or anything that would be a metal. And the opening of the omega goes in the direction that the zone is coming from.
Okay, so to clarify for people, what Harold's saying is you take a piece of wire and bend it in the shape of the Greek letter omega.
Yes.
Okay.
So it has a flat and then three-quarters of a circle and then a flat again.
Uh-huh.
Or like the ohm sign if you're thinking of electronics.
Uh-huh.
And that points out, and it's laid flat on the ground, and you can bury it underneath the ground, which I suggest, because if you have a gardener or somebody's mowing the grass or something else, they're going to disrupt it probably. And I find that these things stay that way. I had one person here in town that was cleaning up the house, and her husband went out and he just raked everything in the whole yard and threw everything away, including the omega signs. So I came back out and redid it again, and they were exactly in the same place they were about a year and a half before.
Interesting.
They hadn't changed an inch. So it's not something that wears out, or I had one person that used to do feng shui that this lady had me come in, and this guy had told her that he needed to come out every year for $800 and clear her house of geopathic zones.
Mm.
And I thought, well, that's a great money-making scheme, but unless there was some big earth changes going on or whatever, you'd be wasting $800.
Yeah.
And plus, he had came in before me, and he had found the zone all right, but he didn't neutralize it. He didn't get rid of it.
Wow. Wow.
So it kind of ties in with feng shui somewhat. But if I was doing one of these, the first thing I would do, if I was in the house, say, what direction is it coming from? And then I would just walk and let the rods point in the direction that it's coming from.
Okay. So again, to clarify, you're walking around, you've got these L rods, which are basically a long, straight piece of wire with a little 90-degree bend in them where you can hold them. And you hold them in basically you make a fist, and you have the little end of the rod, and you're holding it in your fist. You've got one in each hand, and you're walking forward, and these rods are pointing straight out in front of you, correct?
Right. And what I'm doing, asking the direction, I want them to move in parallel, but point in the direction that this is coming from.
Mm.
So sometimes I may keep turning around a little bit, more until they finally stop at the direction that it's coming from.
Okay.
And then...
and when you find one, the wires cross?
No, they just stop moving.
Oh.
Because in this case, I'm only getting direction, nothing else. So once they stop moving and they're pointing in those, both of them are parallel, pointing in the same direction.
But then when you go over a
and what I do
stress,
is cross the house at a 90-degree angle and go through and say, okay, let's see where this starts and where it ends.
Hmm.
So then I walk through the house again, seeing where I'm going to cross them. And sometimes these things are 12, 15 feet wide, and other times they're only, I think, about 6 inches is the narrowest one I've ever ran into. Very thin. And then once I cross it, then try to figure out a place that I can put this omega sign that's really inconspicuous and out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they don't always go in straight lines. So,
well, I guess that makes sense if you got geological formations underground affecting them.
Right, because they could go anyway. I've even seen them go upstairs. Not keeping particularly even on the ground plane. They would actually go upstairs. So anyway, so then I usually go exterior to the house. Sometimes I even start exterior to the house and find out where they are, and then say, well, gee, we could, there's some rocks or some bushes or something over there that we could hide things. So let's see if it goes straight over there. And sometimes it's over there, on the edge. Sometimes all of a sudden it'll make a curve, clear over a 90-degree turn, be another direction. I had a vet here in town that used to refer people to me, and this lady had lost many dogs. That she'd get a dog, and within 2 to 3 years, the dog would get cancer and die. And so the vet said, hey, why don't you see what's going on with this lady? So I went out and looked at the house, and I noticed how it came through the house. I went out through the house in the back, and she had a very large lot. And then it made a 90-degree turn, and then went over to the right side of the property. And so I went over to where she had a fence there. So I went ahead and buried it in there. And as I came back into the house, she says, that's really interesting. And I said, why is that? She says, you see that place where it made that 90-degree turn? I go, yeah. She goes, my dogs sleep there all the time. Outside. She says, when they're outside, that's exactly where they sleep.
Interesting.
Because animals have this intrinsic value if they're your pet that they try to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
So the pets were, again, automatically sleeping in that zone to protect the people in the house.
Wow.
So animals are very, very interesting. They're very simple in their love. It's just unconditional. They just do it.
Mm-hmm. I know. I got dogs, and those little things are just amazing. They're just. I wish people were more like it. I wish I was more like them. It's like they're good sports. They never get mad with each other. They play. They're just it really. Of course, they don't have a lot of stress in their lives either. But
well, that's true. And also when I do animals energetically, an hour session on them is really all they take.
Wow.
They'll just turn around. Like, again, there's no barriers, no filters or anything else. But so I thought that was really interesting. So once, again, let me go back a little bit. So once I found out how wide it is, and then, again, how far away I can get it from, where the people are living. Again, if it's on a lot, I go to the edge and make sure. Then I find the middle, and then I put this in the middle of the zone and neutralize it that way. Then I go back into the house where I originally crossed it and make sure that it's gone, that there's nothing there. Mm-hmm. And then ask, are there any others in this house? And most of the time I get a no, but once in a while I get a yes. And then I do the same exact process. Okay, which direction is it coming from? And then cross it to see where it is, and how big it is, and then trace it out and neutralize it. Mm-hmm. In an apartment, it's a little more challenging in the fact that usually you can only put this omega sign, under a cedar chest or, under the bed or, some place that, it's not going to be too conspicuous, but on the other hand, you're still protected. And like I say, some of those have been kind of challenging. Or I've had people where Chester drawers went all the way to the floor. So what they did is they put it in the back of a drawer that was against the, farthest back up against the wall. Different things like that. But
well, it makes sense to me.
Stay that way, like I say, unless something changes that that makes them change.
Well, now, one thing that a lot of times people listening to this will think that this sounds like a whole bunch of New Age nonsense. And, to address that, one thing, it all makes sense to me because of my knowledge of working with scalar waves, scalar energy generators, and the devices I manufacture. But, for example, making a piece of wire the shape of an omega and putting it somewhere to stop this negative energy, when you understand that, first of all, that metals are scalar wave guides, they're wave guides. It's just like, if you take a straight piece of wire, it can be an antenna for the wavelength of the length of that wire. In the same way, you can make wave guides for these scalar waves coming up from the Earth.
Right, and this is acting as a wave trap.
Precisely. So, so it may sound like a bunch of nonsense to the uninitiated, but when you get the physics of scalar energy, torsion waves, and you understand that, electrical conductors can guide these waves or block them, then it all makes sense. And the bottom line is, the results. You see the results, and you see it with plants, with animals, with, there's not a placebo effect going on because you can confirm it.
Yeah, there are other ways people have neutralized this or blocked it is some people use magnets. They'll, again, find where the center is and they'll put a magnet down. Another thing people can do is actually make an omega sign by putting blue paint, spraying something with the blue paint.
Interesting.
The kind of a cobalt blue.
Interesting.
I've seen people do that. They seem to be effective. I learned how to do this when I used to live over in Los Angeles, and how I ran into it was one of these, whole life expo things that they used to have years ago. And there was an older gentleman there, and he says, "Hey, I can tell you which vertebrae in your spine is out." And since I was having a lot of back pain at the time, I said, "Okay, you're on. If you can find where this back pain is for me, I'll go to your seminar." And he pinpointed it right on. I mean, it was exactly the right vertebrae. So And he did this training. It was a over the weekend type thing, and he did it in a church. And one of the other things about these zones is you really, and this is somewhat superstition, but you don't want it coming in your front door.
Mm-hmm.
And this would, again, tie in with feng shui as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this church had one coming right in the front door of the church.
Wow.
So we went and somebody had some blue paint, so we painted on the street an Omega sign.
Wow.
In front, and all of us went out independently to look for these zones, and we all came to the same conclusion. So it wasn't like 25 different people finding 25 different things. It was everybody came to the same conclusion. So it was pretty dramatic. And one time I did a training class on this at somebody's apartment, and after I had talked about it, I says, okay, everybody go out and see if you can find some geopathic zones, because I had doubted before I got there that there was something there. I didn't examine it or what it was, and so I had like 3 different answers that people said, well, I found one over here, and somebody says, well, I found one over there, and I says, well, which direction is it coming from? So what it was the same one. It was like a curly Q, like a bobby pin. And so we found out which direction it was, where it turned, and where it came back. Then I said, okay, this is where we neutralize it. Now go back to those other places that you found before and see if it's still there. And it was gone.
Wow. Interesting.
So you don't always do that, but once in a while I had a lady here in town that was chemically sensitive, and I went through her whole house, and I really couldn't find anything. And finally I says, well, where do you sit during the day? And she goes, well, I sit in front of the computer right here. And I says, well, let me go outside the window of that room, which is right where the computer is. And sure enough, it was like 6 inches wide, and it went right where she was sitting in her chair.
Wow.
And then it did it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, you mentioned classes. Do you teach classes on how to do this?
I do. In fact, I'm doing one this weekend up in Sedona.
Oh, wow.
At the Dowsers meeting up there at the Presbyterian Church on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
In this one, what I asked people to do, I decided I'd do a little twist on it here, where I had people draw maps of their house and bring it to the thing, and I'll put their name in a hat, and then we'll draw people out of the hat, and then I'll go ahead and work on their particular house and let them neutralize it. So I thought that'd be fun. Or I do them remotely, where I have people call me and ask me, is there one there? And I'll say yes, and then I'll have them draw a map and send it to me. When I do that, I charge them $50 if I'm doing it where they send it in, because I got to spend some time looking it up and stuff and then send it back to them. So.
Yeah. And again, for people that think that, being able to detect a geopathic zone remotely sounds like a bunch of New Age nonsense, again, we're dealing with scalar energy that is interdimensional or non-local in terms of physics. It's what they call non-local in physics. You're not dealing with conventional electromagnetic radiation that is traveling through space. It's interdimensional, and it can show up throughout different frequencies of space-time. And so, therefore, the human biology we operate on scalar energy. Our consciousness is scalar energy. And so people who have trained themselves can pick these things up and detect them.
And some people say, I can't douse. And I admit there are some people who probably can't, because their emotional stuff gets so tied in with it that they get the answer that they want. But if you go into an alpha state when you're doing it, there's been some research where they tested people that were doing dowsing and find out where their brain waves were. And it's a combination of alpha and delta at the same time.
Mm.
They're on top of each other. Because I know sometimes I do body leans. I use, forward for yes, backward for no. And if I'm in a grocery store or something I haven't bought before, and I'm going, should I really purchase these? And again, when I'm doing that, I have to kind of get in the zone to be able to do it.
Slow those brainwave states down.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting you say that, because I've noticed I make scalar energy devices that do exactly that. They slow brainwave states down, and my stress shield device, which is a portable one you carry with you, will do that. And for those who are interested, by the way, it's not out on the market right now. I'm making some upgrades to it, so just check my website or get on my email list, and you'll be notified when the Stress Shield's out. I get a lot of requests for it, but I'm upgrading it now. It's called the Stress Shield, and it's a little pocket device you just carry with you, and it puts out a scalar field that pulses at the Schumann resonance. And it's been my observation and other people's that it will accelerate manifestation of thought in a positive way, but it also will help with meditation, or if you're doing any kind of energy work like dowsing or that, you'll get better results with it, more accurate results, because it puts you into that alpha state.
Yeah, whenever there's anything that's critical, my daughter douses as well, and she says, I'm too emotionally attached to this, so she'll give us a call and say, what do you get? Just to kind of double check before she, does something. That would be a major change in her life.
Now, when you're doing this geopathic work, do you also work with reducing electromagnetic radiation stress, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, if I'm doing it in person, I usually check outlets for, the phase components. Mm-hmm. But before I even do that, I usually ask the question, are these people that live in this house affected by this? In other words, is this important to them or would make a difference in their health? And about half the time, I find out doing, the plug-ins for those to neutralize those. Some people it has no effect on them at all, and other people it's dramatic. Mm-hmm. And then I also check people on their microwave to see if they use a microwave. I said, even if you don't use it very often, but you use it once in a while, put a cup of water in there and let me check, all the way around it. And it's very interesting. On different microwaves, you have different wave fields that are propagated out of the microwave. I had one where the microwave was against the wall, and the back side of the wall was the living room.
Oh, wow.
And the wave out of the back of the microwave went out like 8 feet.
Jeez.
Out of the back, and that's right where they would sit all the time.
Man.
And he says, oh, yeah, we were in the microwave all the time. And I'm going, well, you're getting bombarded every single day.
Oh, yeah.
Microwave,
I mean, even the industry admits that, microwave ovens leak some radiation. So it's not even...
And one of the reasons they change portable phones over to a higher frequency now than they used to was because of the people complained of all the interference from the microwave. When the microwave was on, that your portable phone in the house was very chopped up. I know on our old portable phone we had, it would, you were within, probably 30 feet of it, you would, get cutouts like you would that was on a cell phone, that you were just getting on the edge of where the tower activity was dropping off.
Yeah, that's it. It's funny because I haven't had a microwave in 30 years, and so I don't even think about that. I actually prefer the older phones because the newer ones, the higher frequencies, particularly like with the DEC 6 phones, they're so high frequency, they're just about as bad as cell phones as far as the damage from radiation if you're not protecting yourself. So I remember seeing a talk that you did where you gave out some specifics about things like Stetzerizers and different things you can use to help protect yourself. Can you discuss
That's what
that?
I was referring to, is the Stetzler. There's another company that makes them as well. I'm trying to think of their name. It seems like it's Greenwave? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's Greenwave.
I like their plugins better only because they have a plug in them. So if you're putting it in some area where you would have, limited, plug availability where you're plugging things in, these don't use up your plug. You can still plug things into them and work. And that's the reason I check to ask, are these people affected by this? Because those are somewhat expensive, and if indeed they are affected by it, I've had houses sometimes that needed 8 or 9 of those Stetzler devices, and at $35 to $50 a piece, that's a pretty good chunk of change. If again you weren't affected by it. Then the other one is neon lights that lots of people have particularly houses that were built in the 80s and 90s that have a lot of neon lights in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and interestingly enough, another type of lighting which is really, really bad is halogens.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on how they did the chopper that's in the dimmer. You know, if they did a really, really cheap job of doing that chops down the voltage so that you can dim it, these things put off harmonics that are like 10 or 15 harmonics away from what the original harmonic was at the original frequency.
Wow.
And these things, I was in a lady's house one time clearing a house, and I was putting the Stetzler things in, and I'm going, my gosh, I'm up to like 9 in this house. It seems like every plug I plug into, it's like, because you ideally want a number less than 25, and these were like 400, 450.
Wow.
And I'm going, gee, many Christmas. Seems like I've covered all the circuits, because usually if you put one in a particular circuit, it'll pretty well neutralize that circuit. And then once you've got, most of the circuits of the house done, it'll usually cut them off and you won't have any more. And these things weren't dropping. They were just staying up there. And I don't know why I happened to think of it, but her kitchen was in the middle of the house. It was a very unusual house. And she had somebody come in and put in these very expensive halogen lights, and they were underneath the counter that went around for, I would say, maybe 20 to 25 feet. So there were probably 10 of them or so.
Uh-huh.
And I said, can you turn those lights off? I'm just curious to see. She turned off those lights. Everything went away.
Wow.
Everything back out and reevaluated it and only found maybe 2 or 3 that she needed in the house. She paid a fortune for these halogen lights. It was a custom kitchen, where they put in some expensive embellishments sometimes.
That brings up a good...
How often do you leave these on? She goes, I never turn them off. I have them on 24/7 because, I live by myself in this house, and, at night I'd like a little bit of light. And since it's in the center of the house, I feel protected when I have them on. And I go, you need to turn on an overhead light somewhere or something. Because you're just electrifying your whole house. I've never, ever seen another one quite that strong before. I have once in a while seen other halogen lights that once in a while, show some response, but nothing like this one. This one was like incredible.
Well, that reminds me that I buy incandescent full spectrum light bulbs. That's all I use in my house because I've seen, for example, I think it was Duke University did a study on these LED lights, and they discovered LED lights, no matter what color they actually are, they put out a blue light wave frequency that causes sleep problems. And then, you've got these mercury vapor bulbs that they're selling now as well that, of course, are full of mercury and CFCs and toxins. But also they're pulsing on and off very fast, and they also cause problems with sleep and with brain function and various things. So there are no healthy options in the conventional lighting stores unless you go to full spectrum incandescents, and they're expensive.
Well, and the LEDs keep getting better and better and better. I mean, the early ones were blue. I mean,
but even the light ones, though, even the white ones, what this study from Duke was saying was that no matter what the actual perceived color was, there was always a blue frequency coming through that caused sleep problems. Now, maybe that'll change or has changed some.
I know that, I think was it GE? I'm not quite sure which company it was. But what they did is they made the outside of the light bulb look like an incandescent bulb, so you couldn't see inside. And what they did is they put a filter in there that would filter out all the real high-frequency blue.
Okay, cool.
And how effective it was, that's only been in the last probably year and a half.
Yeah.
So you don't know when Duke did the study whether those were available at the time.
Exactly. I don't trust it. I'm still, as long as I can get full spectrum incandescents, that's what I'm using.
I know in color therapy, Dinshaw, that does the color therapy, people had asked many questions about LEDs, and he's kind of, I don't know whether he's been, just overwhelmed with people asking questions or whatever, but lately he doesn't have any resistance to LEDs. When people asked that question 10 years ago, his answer was no. And people ask about fluorescence, and the answer is still no on fluorescence.
Mm-hmm.
They just can't get them to be that full.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people don't realize they're pulsing on and off really fast, and it's that pulsing, that causes problems.
And also on that pulsing part, it depends on where your resonance is.
Right.
If it happens to be a resonant frequency, that's detrimental for you, that could be really bad. Especially our whole world is full of everything that's pulsed anymore.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned previously, I just want to give out some information for folks listening to this, because you mentioned the greenwave filters and the Stetzer filters. The website for greenwave is greenwavefilters.com, and then the Stetzers, it's STETZER electric.com, StetzerElectric.com. Those are websites for those. And, I sell EMF devices as well. Those Greenwave and Stetzer plug into outlets, and the way they work is they actually, the electricity flowing through the wires in your house circuitry, the electron flow is kind of random and chaotic, and these devices make the electron flow become parallel. The electrons become parallel as they're flowing through the wires, and that reduces the EM fields that they put off. So that's how they work. My approach...
Usually some of the microcurrent that come from that are usually because the voltage and the amperage is just slightly out of phase.
Right. Exactly.
And, somebody said, I went to the electric company and, asked them if their stuff was out of phase. The electric company is naturally going to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a joke.
One thing I know is people that have particularly a fair amount of them in their house, it makes all of the motors in their house run a little bit cooler than they did before.
Exactly. There are devices you can buy that will do this, where you plug it into an outlet and then you plug your refrigerator or whatever into that, and it does the same thing. It brings the power into phase, it cleans it up, and it makes the waveforms coherent. If you Google dirty electricity, folks, you can read more about that, the opposite of that.
I have another device that's sold to the high-end electronics, high-end $10,000 stereo market.
Mm.
And what this does is this senses and neutralizes peaks that are coming in on the voltage, and when it does, it turns on this blue LED. And the name of it is Noise Harvester.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we use those in the computer industry. I used to use they're called line conditioners in the computer industry, but basically it takes that dirty electricity and cleans it all up and sends it through a nice, perfect signal.
I have this plugged in all the time in my house. Sometimes I'll go days and it won't turn on. And then, man, that sucker turns on and it's flashing probably 30, 40 times a second.
Exactly. I'm here in Florida where we have a lot of power surges and, lightning storms and stuff like that. And so you have to have everything on battery backups and surge protectors. But I also, nowadays you can buy line conditioning battery backup systems. So I've got those. And it's pretty interesting how, you'll see, like you said, you'll see these flurries of power fluctuations just bam, bam, hitting it.
And it could be anybody from running an old power saw, that wasn't making very good contact, to something at the power station. It could be anywhere.
Exactly.
And the only thing about these things I have noticed, that is, if you purchase them, you need to order two, because each of them goes on one leg of the 110 coming into the house.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might have noise on one leg and not on the other leg.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, I know I plugged them into one place, and this thing was going like crazy, and I said, I'm just curious. I'm going to put it over here on this. I know this other circuit's on the other leg of the house. And nothing. I went back and plugged it in back where I had it before, and it was going like crazy, and I'm going, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my approach to dealing with household power, as far as that goes, I sell these devices called Amoras that you put on the main breaker of the house. And then what it does is it structures the electron flow coming in at the main breaker, so everything gets cleaned up throughout the house at the source, which is nice, and it's easy to do.
You put them in the electric box, or do you?
Yeah, you put it on the main breaker panel. You actually attach it to the main breaker, and it puts out a little scalar field, and that structures the electron flow of the wire, the electricity coming through the main wires there, and then anything beyond that, it's structured, so the fields are reduced, and it works. It's quite interesting.
Neat. Everybody should.
Yeah, everybody does need this kind of protection. There's so many hazards to our health these days. It's ridiculous. EM radiation, nuclear fallout, geoengineering pollutants, biowarfare agents, on and on and on. It's crazy. Most people have no idea. Well, Harold, we've been yakking for 90 minutes, and, I could yak for another 90 minutes with you. I know, see, folks, I know what's in Harold's head. There's like this huge volume of stuff we haven't even begun to touch that we could. So we'll get you back on another time and talk about some other stuff, Harold. But, again, folks, if you're interested in contacting Harold, check out naturesoils.net. And Harold, anything else you'd like to say? Any other websites or anything else you want to let people know about?
No, the only thing is if you look on there and you find something, the phone number's on there too, which is 480-998-9055.
Okay, very good. And you're in the Phoenix area, correct?
Correct, yeah. We live in a very unusual house. We live in an underground dome. So we pretty well block out most of the electronic noise. Cell phones and things don't work too good in here.
That's great. Now, you said you do workshops and things. If somebody wanted you, let's say, to come to Minnesota and do a workshop, can you do that?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So basically, if people can make the economics work out, then you can travel and do workshops. Do you ever do online webinars or anything like that?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
I haven't done any videos or, anything like that.
Okay.
No.
Well, maybe I'll get you on a webinar sometime. We can do that. Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Harold. And, again, folks, if you want to contact Harold, it's naturesoils.net, and the phone number is 480-998-9055. And thank you again so much, Harold, and we'll catch you some other time.
All right. Thank you, then. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.